On the same day that Holmes made his admission, the heavily criticized World Health Organization report into the origins of the COVID virus was released. The WHO report stated that a lab leak was extremely unlikely, and the lead investigator of that report, Peter Van Embrich, said there should be no further investigation of the lab leak theory. Embrich also publicly stated that the Chinese government was highly cooperative and never pressured him to remove anything from his report. But more privately, Embrich was telling a Danish documentary team that the lab leak theory was probable, and he suggested that a Chinese researcher could have been infected by a bat while taking samples in connection with research at a Wuhan lab. Embrich also admitted that a deal had been struck between the World Health Investigative Team and their Chinese counterparts. Embrich's deceptive WHO report seems to have its origins in the narrative established by Fauci and Farrar in a February 1, 2020 teleconference that included both Holmes and Andersen. During this secret teleconference, which included presentations from Andersen and Holmes, the two men told the small teleconference group that they each believed the virus had originated from a lab. At one point early in the discussion, a telling email was sent that told the other participants, "We need to talk about the backbone too, not just the insert." Andersen told the teleconference group that he was 60 to 70% sure that the virus had come from a laboratory. Holmes was apparently even more convinced, telling the teleconference group that he was 80% sure that the virus had come out of a lab. The problem lay not in the admissions from Andersen and Holmes, but rather in what they were preparing for written publication at the very same time that the teleconference was taking place. As the two men were privately advising Fauci and Farrar that the virus appeared to have originated from a lab, they were drafting their proximal origin letter in which they would promote a natural origin narrative for the virus, stating that we do not believe that any type of laboratory-based scenario is plausible. According to Robert Gary, a co-author of the letter, the first draft was finished on February 1st, the same day as the teleconference. Only one author, Ian Lipkin, was not present on the teleconference, and he would later retract his opinion, admitting that it shouldn't have happened. Andersen's dismissal of a lab leak did not start with Fauci's teleconference. He was already pushing his natural origins narrative before most of the world even knew there was a problem.
On January 14, 2020, Andersen lauded the Chinese Communist Party for its heroics in responding, detecting, identifying, isolating, and sequencing a novel pathogen in 2 weeks. The problem with Andersen's claim is that the Chinese Communist Party didn't do that. As Holmes admitted in the clip we saw earlier, they prevented scientists from disclosing the genomic sequence of the virus. They were doing this at the same time that Andersen was praising them. The genomic sequence of COVID-19 was discovered no later than December 27, 2019. Both Chinese and Western scientists obtained copies at that time. But under pressure from the Chinese Communist Party, neither Chinese nor Western scientists shared the sequence publicly. When a Chinese scientist from Shanghai took it upon himself to release the sequence on January 11, 2020, the Chinese Communist Party shut down his lab. This total submission by scientists, especially Western scientists, allowed the virus to continue its spread at the most critical juncture and gave the Chinese Communist Party additional time to obfuscate the virus's origins, as well as create a natural origins narrative centered around the Wuhan seafood market. Andersen was now fully enmeshed in pushing the natural origins narrative that had been seeded by the Chinese Communist Party. 4 days before Fauci's secret teleconference, on January 28, 2020, Andersen stated that the virus originated at the seafood market, brashly claiming that this was an uncontroversial fact. And on January 31st, 2020, the same day he privately informed Fauci that he thought the virus looked engineered, Andersen publicly mocked Senator Tom Cotton for suggesting the virus may have come from a lab. When confronted with these inconsistencies, Andersen claimed that he changed his mind on the virus's origin after Fauci's teleconference. But his same-day drafting of the proximal origin letter proves that Andersen's alibi is demonstrably false. The truth is that all of these men held two diametrically opposed positions. One that was public, where they pushed a false natural origins narrative, and one that was private, where they concluded that the virus had probably leaked from a Wuhan lab. When Freedom of Information emails were released in June of this year, they revealed Andersen's cover-up. Andersen's apparent response was to abruptly delete his Twitter account. Andersen's involvement in this whole affair remains something of a mystery. Until this point, Andersen had been primarily involved with research into Zika, West Nile, Ebola, and Lassa viruses. Andersen only recently added a reference to coronaviruses on his website. His primary connection to the Wuhan affair appears to lie with Fauci, whose organization has a long history of funding Andersen's work.
Unlike Andersen, Holmes has a lengthy involvement with coronavirus researchers in China. Holmes has written at least 14 articles with Tian Zhenhua, the daredevil Batman of the China CDC. In 2012, Tian started collecting bats from remote locations in China for further study in his Wuhan lab. In 2017, Tian bragged to a Chinese newspaper that he personally captured 10,000 bats in remote caves and that he did so without taking any safety precautions. His claims are backed up by Chinese media who showed photos of a totally unprotected Tian catching bats. Tian also told the same newspaper that he was frequently sprayed with bat urine and blood. In 2013, Holmes and Tian wrote a paper about bat virus experiments conducted on bats which Tian had personally caught in southern China and brought back to Wuhan. In addition to Tian, Holmes is also a close associate of the head of the Chinese CDC, Gao Fu.